gangster rap world has been shaken again, this time by the violent death of the performer known as Notorious B.I.G.
The rapper was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He was pronounced dead a short time later.
Some stories never let a culture move on. A voice disappears, but the questions get louder. For years, hip-hop carried a wound it could not close. Rumors filled the silence where answers should be. Now, a long-buried account rises to the surface, and it forces us to look back one last time. The night Biggie Smalls was gunned down. For 28 years, the murder of the notorious B.I.G. haunted hip-hop like a ghost. His death sparked conspiracy theories, rivalries, and unanswered questions. Fans demanded justice, while the LAPD stayed quiet. Now, in 2025, a former detective says he knows who pulled the trigger and why. On March 8, 1997, Los Angeles was buzzing after the Soul Train Music Awards. Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G., was making his first major West Coast appearance since Tupac Shakur's death 6 months earlier. Despite the tension of the East Coast-West Coast feud, Biggie was there to promote peace and his upcoming double album, Life After Death. Later, he went to a Vibe magazine after-party at the Peterson Automotive Museum with Sean Puffy Combs, their entourages, and security. The mood seemed relaxed. Biggie laughed with fans and moved through the crowd like he had finally settled into superstardom. Just after midnight, Biggie's group decided to leave early. They formed a convoy, with Biggie in the front passenger seat of a dark green GMC Suburban. Puffy's vehicle was ahead, security close behind. At around 12:45 a.m. on March 9th, the caravan stopped at Fairfax Avenue and Wilshire Boulevard. At the red light, a black Chevy Impala pulled up beside Biggie's SUV on the driver's side, slowing deliberately. From the driver's window, a lone gunman fired a 9mm pistol. 4 bullets hit Biggie. He slumped in his seat, mortally wounded. The driver sped toward Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, only minutes away, with security racing alongside. Paramedics tried to save him, but at 1:15 a.m., Biggie was pronounced dead. He was 24 years old. The shooting happened in front of potential witnesses, yet the killer vanished. Accounts conflicted. Some said the shooter wore a bow tie. A nearby bank camera may have caught part of the scene, but the footage was too grainy to identify anyone. The black Impala disappeared into the night and was never recovered. The timing made everything worse. Tupac had been gunned down in Las Vegas on September 13, 1996, and died 6 days later. Now, hip-hop's 2 biggest icons were gone. In eerily similar drive-by shootings, the public didn't see coincidence. They saw connection. Was it revenge, gang business, or a power move? Days before he died, Biggie had said he wanted to move beyond the feud. The title Life After Death suddenly felt prophetic. One question swallowed everything else. Who killed Biggie Smalls? East versus West. The rap feud that turned fatal. Before betrayal and bullets, there was a friendship. In the early 1990s, Tupac Shakur and Biggie Wallace weren't just fellow rappers, they were close. Tupac helped Biggie early on, even letting him crash on his couch, sharing performance tips, and guiding him through the industry. For a moment, the East and West felt connected. That changed on November 30th, 1994, at New York City's Quad Recording Studios. Tupac arrived for a session and was ambushed in the lobby by armed men in what looked like a robbery gone violent. He was shot 5 times and survived, but his trust did not. Tupac quickly believed the attack wasn't random. He felt set up, and he suspected the people who brought him there knew what was coming. Biggie and Sean "Puffy" Combs were reportedly inside the building. To Tupac, that felt like proof. Biggie and Puffy denied involvement, but Tupac's view hardened. Former friends became enemies. Soon after, Tupac was convicted in a separate case involving sexual assault charges and sent to prison. By the time he was released in 1995 and signed with Death Row Records, the feud was boiling. In 1996, he released Hit 'Em Up, one of the most vicious diss tracks in hip-hop, claiming he slept with Faith Evans and attacking Puff Daddy and Bad Boy Records. The conflict wasn't just music anymore. It was personal and public. Death Row versus Bad Boy, Los Angeles versus New York, Suge Knight versus Puff Daddy. Tensions spilled into award shows and media, including the 1995 Source Awards, where threats and subliminal shots made it feel like something terrible was coming. Then it did. Tupac was killed in Las Vegas in September 1996. Though Biggie was never officially tied to Tupac's death, whispers of revenge followed his name. So, when Biggie was murdered, 6 months later, many saw retaliation, not tragedy. A case gone cold. LAPD's failed investigation. After Biggie's death, people expected swift justice. He was one of the most famous rappers in the world, killed in a public place with witnesses and security nearby. But weeks passed, then months, and no arrest came. Behind the scenes, the LAPD investigation unraveled. The case was marked by disorganization and missteps. Leads weren't followed, witnesses weren't properly interviewed, and evidence was reportedly mishandled or disappeared. Fear grew over where the evidence might lead, especially as suspicions surfaced that LAPD officers could be connected to Biggie's death. The investigation quietly slowed, then stalled. Over time, whispers became allegations. Journalists and insiders suggested links between LAPD officers and Death Row Records, but nothing reached a courtroom in a meaningful way. In 2002, Biggie's mother, Valletta Wallace, and his widow, Faith Evans, filed a civil lawsuit accusing the LAPD of corruption, negligence, and covering up rogue officer involvement. It included claims that officials destroyed key documents and blocked internal probes. The case was dismissed, not because the allegations were disproven, but due to procedural barriers and lack of cooperation. A second lawsuit followed in 2007, with new statements and deeper claims of cover-up. It was also dismissed before any final judgment. The FBI opened its own inquiry in the early 2000s, then stepped away without charges, citing insufficient evidence and limited cooperation. For Biggie's family, that failure felt personal. The case stayed open, but no one was arrested. To many, it looked like a system protecting itself before protecting the truth. With Tupac dead and Biggie on the other side of the feud, some believed Suge ordered Biggie's murder in retaliation or to settle deeper business scores. Suge denied it, but suspicion stayed. Another major theory focused on rogue LAPD officers with death row ties. One name that kept surfacing was David Mack, a former LAPD officer later convicted in 1997 for masterminding a brazen bank robbery. Mack's alleged gang ties and taste for flashy cars fed comparisons to the black Chevy Impala used in the drive-by. Investigative journalist Chuck Phillips and former LAPD detective Russell Poole argued Mack could have helped plan or carry out the murder. Poole believed Mack's motive could be loyalty and money, earning cash, protection, and status within Suge Knight's orbit. To some, Mack wasn't just corrupt, he was a willing participant. Poole also suspected Amir Muhammad as the trigger man, saying he matched witness descriptions and had financial ties to Mac and Death Row. Muhammad denied the allegations and was never arrested. The evidence remained largely circumstantial, and officials never fully pursued it. Fringe theories even tried to pull Sean Puff Daddy Combs into the narrative, suggesting business tensions or life insurance motives. Most investigators rejected those ideas, and no credible evidence tied Puff Daddy to the murder. Still, his presence that night kept his name circulating in conspiracy culture. Documentaries and series revisited these theories for years, including the 2002 film Biggie and Tupac by Nick Broomfield and the 2018 series Unsolved, The Murders of Tupac and the Notorious B.I.G., which highlighted the Mac/Muhammad theory and alleged LAPD corruption. Poole later claimed higher-ups shut down his work when it began pointing toward other officers. Controversial or not, it matched what many feared. The deeper the case went, the more it was blocked. And yet, for decades, nothing changed. No conviction, no official suspect, no closure. Finally solved. The man who killed Biggie Smalls. In 2025, one insider's conclusion is being treated as the most credible answer. Retired LAPD detective Greg Kading says, "The Biggie case is no longer a mystery. It's solved." Kading wasn't on the case in 1997. He was brought in the late 2000s to lead a joint federal task force examining the unsolved murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. His stated goal was to cut through politics and power plays and find what really happened. Kading says the shooter was not David Mack or Amir Muhammad. He names Wardell Pucci Faus, a known member of the mob Piru Bloods and a close associate of Suge Knight. Kading describes Faus as more than a street-level enforcer. Trusted muscle used when things needed to be done, quietly and effectively. At the time of Biggie's murder, Suge Knight was in LA County Jail. Kading says that didn't stop him. He claims Suge communicated through an intermediary, a woman believed to be Suge's girlfriend, who visited him while posing as a legal assistant. Under that cover, Kading says, her conversations weren't monitored like normal inmate visits. Kading states that in 2009, under a confidentiality agreement, this woman gave a full statement to the LAPD and FBI. She said Suge gave direct orders to coordinate Biggie's murder from behind bars. According to Kading, her role was to relay instructions and help arrange payment to Pucci for the hit. Kading says the motive was retaliation for Tupac's death. Even if Biggie wasn't involved, he says Suge blamed the East Coast camp and wanted to send a message. Kading has repeated that his conclusion is backed by multiple informants, telling the same story, and he argues the case is solved, even if it can't be prosecuted. When Kading first presented these findings, in 2009, they drew skepticism. Over time, more journalists and law enforcement veterans began treating his version as the most credible. In 2025, he insists it's no longer a question mark. This is what happened, and this is why it may never go to court. So why no arrests? If the shooter has a name, the next question is obvious. Why has no one been charged? The first answer is simple. Pucci Faus is dead. He was killed in 2003, shot multiple times while riding his motorcycle in Compton. With the alleged trigger man gone, there would be no trial, no testimony, and no jury decision. Kading also points to the weakness of witness cooperation. The alleged intermediary's statement helped build the picture, but she reportedly refused to testify publicly. Without her on the record, prosecutors lost the backbone of their case. There is also the reality of Suge Knight's situation. He is already serving a 28-year prison sentence for an unrelated 2015 hit-and-run that left a man dead. For many in law enforcement, the man believed to be behind Biggie's murder is already behind bars. Reopening an old case with old evidence and fragile witness support could look unnecessary and politically risky. Then there's the institutional cost. Kading and others argue the case has long been shadowed by corruption allegations, including possible involvement by rogue officers. Making official statements or pushing arrests could reopen old scandals and invite lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles. The contrast with Tupac's case only fuels frustration. In 2023, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was arrested in connection with Tupac's murder after a grand jury found enough evidence to prosecute. That case took decades, but it showed law enforcement could still act when conditions aligned. In Biggie's case, Kading's story offers an answer, but not a courtroom path. No living trigger man. No witness willing to testify publicly. Little appetite to dig up the old corruption allegations. So the public is left with something that feels like closure, but not justice. A truth that may never be officially acknowledged. Biggie's legacy. The King of New York, when news broke that the notorious B.I.G. had been murdered, the world froze. Before his body even returned to New York, Brooklyn began to mourn. On March 18, 1997, tens of thousands filled the streets for his funeral procession. Traffic stopped, crowds cried, radios blasted his lyrics as people shouted his name while the hearse passed. It wasn't just a farewell, it felt like the funeral of a king. In the years after, Valletta Wallace became the loudest voice, demanding accountability and protecting her son's name. Faith Evans and Puff Daddy, now Diddy, channeled grief into music. I'll Be Missing You became a global anthem of loss, fixing Biggie's memory deep in pop culture. But Biggie's real legacy is the music. Ready to Die introduced a sharp storyteller from Brooklyn. Life After Death, released weeks after his murder, became one of rap's most acclaimed albums. Both remain landmarks, studied by artists and loved across generations. In 2020, Biggie was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a rare honor for a rapper and a public confirmation of what fans already believed. He wasn't just a great rapper, he was an icon. His children, C.J. Wallace and T.Yana Wallace, have helped carry that legacy forward as stewards of his image through businesses and documentaries. And now, with insiders like Greg Kading calling the case solved, the cloud that followed, Biggie's name begins to lift, at least in public memory. Justice may never come in court, but for many, the silence has finally broken. Biggie's legacy isn't only how he died, but how he lived, through every verse, every beat, and every Brooklyn block that still plays his voice. What do you think about Biggie's death? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Epoch. Dive for more amazing documentaries.